You know, when it came to Marvel Comics, you could tell that in the 1990s, they realized what was their cash cow, which was the X-Men. Like, with all the different X books that we had covered so far in our coverage over the X-Men, and we're only in like 1995 going into 1996, you can tell that they were trying their best to push anything they can when it came to the X-Men. Now, we all know why, because they had some issues going on with the company, but there were so many different X titles. X-Men, Excalibur, Uncanny X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, Wolverine, Cable. Like, you had all of these other books. But then in 1995, they said, you know what? Let's go ahead and add in another book. And we got X-Men. Now, technically, X-Men comes out of Age of Apocalypse. Now, I do know there's some folks out there who don't like the idea of me recovering old information, but like, just in case we have anybody jumping into our coverage leading into the Onslaught storyline, I want to make sure to understand what is exactly going on with all these different characters. And that would be Nate Gray as well, because for Nate Gray, he comes from a different reality, better known as Age of Apocalypse. Let me explain. So when it came to Legion, as we all know, the dude went back in time to kill off Magneto, but unfortunately, he had killed off Charles Xavier. And with the death of Charles Xavier, it brought in a brand new timeline, better known as Age of Apocalypse. Now, with this brand new timeline, we were given brand new versions of different characters that we love and care for, like a new version of Wolverine, or Cyclops, or Jean Grey. But for Cable, things had to be a tad bit different, because for this new reality, there was no Madelyne Pryor. And for Cable, Madelyne Pryor is technically his mother, and Scott Summers is his father. But in new reality, there was no Madelyne. So how can we bring Cable into this reality? Well, for Mr. Sinister, he kind of realized that, if Scott Summers and Jean Grey had a child, that child would be very powerful. And so what he did was he created Nate Gray by taking DNA samples of Scott Summers and Jean Grey. And with those samples, he created, of course, good old Nate. And Mr. Sinister was correct. Nate Gray was very powerful, but here's the thing, because when it came to the end of Age of Apocalypse, that reality was going to die. Now, you did have a few characters being able to leave that reality and go back to the main Marvel universe. So, for example, Dark Beast and Sugarman. Now, those two characters, they had arrived 20 years in the past. But for Nate Gray and Holocaust, they had arrived in the present in the old timeline. And so when it came to Nate Gray, we're technically picking up with him arriving on Earth in the present day, right after you had Legion Quest in Age of Apocalypse. Now, something else we have to remember, that for Nate Gray, he does not have the techno-organic virus in his body. And so for Cable, who has to use most of his powers to keep that virus at bay, for Nate Gray, he's a free man to use all his powers whenever he wants to. Well, technically, he's still learning how to use his abilities. But that kind of leads us into the opening pages for issue number 5, where it's Nate Gray just arriving on Earth. Like, literally, he just crashed. He's getting up and kind of wondering, like, where in the world is he? Now, for Nate, he still kind of believes that he's in his reality, on his Earth. But as he kind of walks around, he slowly begins to realize that there's something off about his surroundings. Like, for example, he sees snow. He's kind of like, wait a second. This is snow. It's cold. Okay, you know what? Let me continue to walk around and figure out what exactly is happening to me. Now, as he walks around, he does walk onto a road where, of course, you do have this driver crash into him. Now, the driver does pull over, and the driver say, you know what, let me make sure that he is okay, which, of course, Nate is okay. But for the driver, he's kind of wondering, where in the world did Nate come from? Now, while you have the driver trying to help Nate out, well, that is when you have Nate kind of begin to remember different things from the old reality. Apocalypse, his son Holocaust, the last battle he had against Apocalypse before he came into this reality. It's all crashing into his mind all at once. But he still believes that he's still in his old reality. And so when he looks at the driver, he's kind of like, hey, are you working for Apocalypse? But for this driver, he has no idea what Nate is even talking about. But he does run away because Nate powers begin to kind of go a tad bit crazy. Now for Nate, he does realize that he has to continue on, but also kind of find some answers as well. Now, luckily for Nate, there's a town nearby in Switzerland. And so for him, he continues on and heads over to that nearby town. But with Nate using his powers, we kind of have a small callback to what Ford said to Nate in the Age of Apocalypse reality. Every single time Nate tries to use his powers, he's kind of like a beacon for trouble, meaning that other people will come after him sooner or later to hopefully use him for their own personal reasons. And so we jump over to the X-Men, Charles Xavier and Bishop. Now, technically, when it comes to Charles Xavier and Bishop, they're not going to try to use him in a negative way, but it's Charles kind of realizing that there's somebody powerful now on Earth. He's kind of like, that right there, that power, it scares me. But now he's unable to pick up on Nate Gray because Nate has cloaked himself from other people who may find him. But as we switch over to Nate Gray in Switzerland, it's Nate now kind of walking around and kind of slowly realizing that he's somewhere completely different. Like, for example, he sees children. Now, yes, he did see kids in his past reality, but when he sees these kids, they're outside having fun. They're playing, and that's completely different for him. But on top of that, he also sees small TVs and shopping windows as well. He's kind of like, wait a second, where in the world am I? What in the world is going on? And also, you have people speaking a completely different language that he's used to. And so for him, it's him having a hard time understanding that he's no longer at home. He's now in a brand new reality. But at the same time, he's still a young boy because he was created by Mr. Sinister, who kind of kept him locked away for a short period of time. And then Forge tried his best to kind of help Nate grow into an adult mind state. But either way, it's Nate slowly trying to figure out things. Now, luckily, he does find somebody. He finds a guy known as Sven. And Sven says, you know what? Come with me. Now, at first, Sven was going to ignore Nate. But Nate powers kind of changed the mind of Sven to help him out. And so you have him take Nate over to his house. Now, right after you have Sven leave, you have Nate powers kind of go a tad bit crazy again. Not like to the point where he might blow something up, but he's having a hard time controlling his abilities. And so earlier, without their calling for help, his powers did reach out to other people who were somewhat similar to him. And so his powers had reached out to somebody we have not seen since X-Men Inferno. And that would be Madelyne Pryor. Now, as we dive into the next chapter, we're picking up with the Sugarman. Now, the Sugarman is one of those characters who had arrived into this reality. But like I said earlier, the Sugarman and Dark Beast, they had arrived in this reality 20 years in the past. And so for Sugarman, he had been working behind the scenes when it came to Genosha. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain the whole idea of Genosha for this video, but just know now who the Sugarman, he wants to go after good old Nate Gray. Now, he's going to use a character known as Rex. Now, we have seen the alternate reality version of Rex when it came to Age of Apocalypse. And that version is more of like a follower to Apocalypse. But this Rex in this reality is more of a mercenary that Sugarman just hired to go after Nate, to bring Nate to him. And of course, Rex is down with the idea. But as we switch back over to Nate Gray and Madelyne Pryor, it's the two characters trying to figure out one another. Now, it does seem like Madelyne did come here to help out Nate Gray, but at the same time, she might have something else up her sleeve. Unfortunately, we have no idea what that could possibly be. But we also get the idea that she does not remember everything from her past. Now, we also get the idea that she does remember some things, but not everything. And so she's not trying to share much information to us as the readers, but also information to Nate as well. Now, for Nate, he wants to make sure that she is not a spy for Apocalypse or for Mr. Sinister. Now, before he says that last name, he does tell her, like, you look like somebody I saw in my old reality, better known as Jean Grey. Now, for Madelyne, she pretends she has no idea, like, who Jean Grey is. She does say, like, you know what, the name did sound familiar, but unfortunately, I have no idea who that is. But the way it was drawn, you're kind of like, no, she does know who Jean Grey is, but does not want to tell him anything at all. Now, once you do have Nate say the name Mr. Sinister, she begins to freak out. And that is why I say some things are locked away deep into her mind, but some are there on the surface. It's kind of like she just had a flashback of all the bad things he did to her over the years. And so you have Nate trying his best to calm her down, but now it's him kind of realizing that maybe they came to one another to help each other out and heal each other's mind. But while you have those two characters trying their best to heal up, you have Sven trying his best to get a drink at a bar to fully understand what happened earlier when it came to him meeting Nate Gray. Because at first, he was not going to help Nate at all, but something changed in his mind. We already know most likely it was because of Nate. Now, as soon as he begins to talk about Nate, that is when you have a guy walk into the bar, and that would be Rex. And for Rex, he's like, oh, this is perfect because now I can figure out where this Nate guy is at and hopefully finish the job that I was given. Now, the Sugarman is not the only person who had picked up on Nate Gray. It is also a character known as Blacksmith. Now, Blacksmith is closer to Cable. As a matter of fact, he's just like Cable, came from the far future. But for Blacksmith, he picked up on the powers of Nate Gray, but also now picking up two signals. Now, we're kind of left to believe that the second one is most likely Madelyne Pryor. And speaking of Madelyne Pryor, you have Nate believe that he has the ability to heal her mind. And so you have Nate try to dive into her mind to begin that process. The problem is that when he does begin to probe her mind, well, he does pull out this, I want to say, a psionic energy construct that just takes the form of havoc, a dark form of havoc. And so we get this idea that is her slowly remembering different things from her past, especially when it comes to the character like Havoc, her last second lover at the end of X-Men Inferno. Now, with all that being said, she also remembers that she does not like the X-Men. Now, the rest of this chapter is really more of Rex being able to find Nate. Now, for Nate, lucky for him, he had some time to recover after trying to probe the mind of Madelyne. But once he was able to recover, he kind of realized they're being confronted by a guy known as Rex who wants to bring him in dead or alive. Now, this battle is very short-lived because how powerful Nate Gray truly is. Rex is nowhere near his level. And so you have Nate defeat Rex and Madelyne and Nate begin to leave. But for Rex, he's not going to give up that easily. His main goal is to continue to hopefully find Nate and bring Nate back over to the Sugarman. Now, as we dive into the final chapter for this video, we do see another character getting involved in this storyline, and that would be Selene. Now, technically, we have not seen her since the upstart organization had kidnapped her and tried to kill her as a way to get some points, but now she's free again, and she kind of picked on something very powerful nearby. And you would think like, okay, she's going after Nate Gray, but in reality, she's going after Madelyne Pryor. Now, for a brief moment, we kind of jump back over to Nate Gray and Madelyne. Now, the two characters had ran away over to, I want to say London, but either way, you have the two characters kind of being able to build a bond with one another. Now, for Nate, he's flying around with her in his arms, but he does kind of lose control of his powers again, where they do kind of crash into a fountain. Now, here's the thing, because it does kind of seem like the book is trying to build a certain kind of bond, but not like, Madelyne Pryor trying to be his adoptive mother, but more kind of like possible girlfriend, because technically for Nate Gray, he's not related to Madelyne at all. He's from a different reality where in that reality, there was no Madelyne Pryor at all. But either way, it does seem like these two characters might become something special with one another. But while you have that bond being built, you have Selene continue to watch over them. And really for Selene, she's kind of intrigued by Nate, but she's more intrigued by Madelyne Pryor. Now, for Selene, around this time in Marvel Comics, she was still part of the Hellfire Club. She was the Black Queen. But for Selene, she's kind of like, listen, Madelyne is very powerful, but unfortunately, she does not remember anything from her past, it seems like, or the power that's locked away inside of her. And so now for Selene, it's her goal to find a way to unlock that power that has been locked away in the body of Madelyne. Now, for the Sugarman, this dude being very impatient at the moment. The whole idea of just waiting for some kind of update from Rex is really bothering him. And so he's kind of hoping in the possibility that Rex will be able to take Nate Gray down, but bring Nate over to him. But while you have Nate and Madelyne trying to have dinner, you have Madelyne see a woman. Now, we already know it's Selene. It's Selene calling out to her. But when you have Madelyne ask Nate, does he see that woman over there? Of course, for Nate, he does not. He's kind of like, what are you talking about? There's nobody there at all. But again, for Nate, he wants to help out Madelyne. So you do have the two characters leave the restaurant to go investigate what Madelyne had possibly saw. Now, while you do have our two characters walking away, they don't realize they're being followed, again, by Rex. And for Rex, he's just waiting for the right time to get close enough to hopefully take down Nate, and most likely Madelyne as well. But for Nate Gray and also Madelyne Pryor, when they do arrive at the location where Madelyne has saw, well, of course, Selene, they can't find her. They run into other people who are not really important at all. But you didn't have Selene appear, but kind of cloaked, making sure her face cannot be seen at all. And you have Selene show Madelyne this necklace, saying, look into this necklace, and what do you see? And of course, for Madelyne, she sees a face. Now, for Selene, this is the beginning of her trying to bring Madelyne over to her side, because she says, most people are not really able to see anything at all that's hidden inside the necklace, which means they're powerless. But for you, because you saw something, that means you have a gift. Come with me. Now, she does hand Madelyne the necklace and disappear. And the reason why, because Nate appears. Now, for Nate, he wants to know what in the world is going on. But for Madelyne, she does not want to tell him anything at the moment. But while you have Madelyne running away, Rex is still there. And you have Rex to call in and give an update over to the Sugarman. Now, Sugarman's not happy, but the problem is right now, the two characters are not really able to communicate with one another. And the reason why, because well, at first it seems like, okay, there is a lot of static. But in reality, it's Selene saying like, hey, Sugarman, leave her and him alone, especially her. Stay out of this because I'm going to need both of them, but most likely Madelyne more than Nate. But Selene was able to get Madelyne alone once again. And when she does, it's really her saying like, You were destined for greatness in the past, but your life was cut short. But now you have been given a second chance. And with that second chance, I want to help you reach brand new heights when it comes to your power. And so it's her convincing Madelyne to leave with her. So Selene and Madelyne, they disappear just like that. By the time Nate Gray gets there, it's too late. Madelyne is gone. And so it does hurt him so much because this time he felt like he found somebody who was special to him. And the book ends on that note right there. And so with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.